Welcome back to McKillip Life. My name is Amber and today I am in the kitchen. I am running out of sourdough. See, all of a little bit. I have a piece every morning for breakfast. So I need more sourdough. So I decided I wanted to bring you along the journey and my process of making sourdough. For the most part, it's basically a day to do it, but in reality, it's multiple days, and you'll see why. This is my sourdough discard. I keep it in a jar in the fridge, and I use it in preparation for being able to make sourdough. Actually, this morning, I made several recipes with sourdough discard because why throw it out if I put so much time and energy into making it, and it's a useful thing for my gut. So this morning I made oatmeal and raisin muffins with sour discard and then also pancakes. And I tend to make a lot of pancakes and then put them in the freezer and they work wonderfully for defrosting for a quick breakfast. So I need to find more recipes for sourdough discard because this just made a little bit of space for me to put stuff in, and I actually have a recipe I've been waiting to do. I just haven't planned around it to make it happen because it's sourdough discard pizza dough. But it's one of those ones where you make it in the morning and you use it in the evening. It's not make it and stick it in the freezer and it's available whenever you want it. So I haven't got around to using it yet. But yeah, I need to expand my discard repertoire. But back to the process of making sourdough. This is my discard. It lives in the refrigerator. And it just waits until I'm ready to use it. This is my actual sourdough starter. It's in a mason jar, and I have a rubber band and plastic lid. So as you can see, it's kind of dirty from living in here for a while. This also lives in the refrigerator. After I make a loaf of bread, it goes and sits in the fridge and waits for me because it can sit in the fridge unfed for a long time. And then that way I'm not having a constant supply of sourdough discard. This is just the process of what I'm going to talk about now. So I've pulled it out of the refrigerator and I'm letting it come down to room temperature, and I stick it over on a seed starting mat I have over in the corner that I put my fermented things on just to bring it a little bit higher than room temperature because our house tends to be cold anyways. So a couple days ago I did that and I didn't feed it at all. Once it got to room temperature, I fed it once, and so today I'm going to feed it again. And if it's responsive and active, then more than likely tomorrow-ish we'll actually get around to making the actual bread. So today it's just a matter of the starter is waking up, coming out of the fridge, and I'm wanting to get it ready to make bread in the next few days. So I take my sourdough starter and in a clean jar, I put that on my scale, tear it out, and put it on the gram setting. And I'm going to pour an equal measure of starter, water, and flour. So I just keep it simple and say 100 grams of each. So we're going to go for, and I like to give this just a stir, because sometimes it can separate a little bit and get a little watery layer on top. That just makes it a more consistent product. So 100 grams. And if it's a smidge over basically, I don't worry about it. So this is all the starter I'm going to use going forward. So all of this is considered discard. So I'm going to add this to my discard jar, which I made room in by making the other recipes today. So it's relatively clean, and I'm going to soak this in the sink. Dried sourdough discard can be it acts like paste. I've heard people say it's like glue. It's nice to soak in hot water to get it off. So I have my 100 grams of sourdough in here, so I'm going to tear it out and test my water because my husband has a tendency to randomly boil the water. And you want your water to be no more than 110 degrees, because after that you start killing your yeast. So right now it's at 93, which is nice. It's above room temperature, but it's not hot, so that'll work. So 100 grams of water. A little bit more. Okay. Now it comes to the flour. I tried doing a sourdough starter from fresh whole grain, freshly milled whole grain flours here at home, and it did not work very well. It just never got strength to it. All I can say is it must have been the brand. Kept cutting it, and it never really got a good rise to it. It wasn't very strong. So now I just use plain old white flour from the store. And my thinking is this is a very small portion, the flour-wise, very small portion of the whole batch I make. So I'm still getting the majority of what I'm eating is going to be the home ground, home milled flour. But my starter is just pure white flour. It just makes for a stronger starter for some reason. And I have to tell myself anything's better than nothing. And this is mostly what I want to be eating. So I'm gonna tear it out, get grams, and I'm gonna work for 100 here. It's usually like 2.5 scoops or so with this spoon. Okay, so I'm at my 100. So now I'm done with the scale for today. I can put it away and mix this up. And it's just mixing it so it has fewer lumps. It's not going to be lump free. And making sure there's no pockets of flour on the corners anywhere. You want the water to be thoroughly mixed in. And then I scrape down the sides for clarity's sake. So scrape down the sides. I like this long, skinny spatula. I believe it's an OXO. It just works well getting into small, deep, long containers. I tend to find myself reaching for it a lot recently. So the sides are scraped down. And here comes the magic of the rubber band. So there's my fed sourdough starter. Here's my rubber band. I put it where the level is. Now I can put this on my counter and at a glance see, did it double in size? Is it working up? Is it coming down? Because what happens is it feeds on the new flour in the mixture, and as it feeds, it'll rise and rise and rise. And the whole thing with bread making is you want to catch it at the higher points in order to use it in your bread. Because then you take that really active starter, add it to more flour, and then it gets even more happy and it gets big and your bread rises. But if you let it sit for a long enough time, it starts coming down. And that's like when you have overproof bread. It's not as strong, it's not as full of life, and it's going back to sleep. So it's fed. So now I'm going to put the lid on. I am just setting it on. I'm not twisting it. I want it to have airflow, but I want to keep bugs from landing in it and coming into it. So this goes over on my counter now. If I wanted to use that for cooking today, I could, theoretically. People say the best time to use it is about 4 hours after feeding it. That comes into play in the next step, knowing that timing. So this was simply awakening my starter, getting it ready to do its job probably tomorrow. So this discard starter can now be put back in the refrigerator. I do seal that tight because when it's cold and in the fridge, it's not going to be active and putting off lots of gas. It'll just slow down the fermentation process. It doesn't stop fermenting, it just slows it down a lot. So this goes in there and just waits until I'm ready to use it again. Right now, typically, I am the main person eating sourdough. I want to say maybe I'm making bread every 2 weeks. I haven't really tracked it or, analyzed it a whole lot. Just when I get down to a hunk, I go, okay, I need to be making bread sometime soon. I really enjoy it as toast in the morning. I cut off a slice, toast it, put butter, and then I don't buy salted butter, so I salt the top of it so I get that salty flavor. I'm one of the strange people where the doctors say I need to salt my food because my blood pressure tends to be low. So I get to enjoy that as a treat with my breakfast. That's the main thing I've been using it for. I would love to get to the point where I've made homemade bread. Like I have a special tin that will make long loaves for sandwich slicing, and we've done that. But in all honesty, the family doesn't really get excited over it because it's not soft or fluffy because it's a whole grain bread. Theoretically, there are recipes out there somewhere that are soft and fluffy and could be more appealing. But my understanding is the more towards the soft and fluffy side you get, then the more less whole grains, the more sifting of your flour, the more adding of other stuff to it to make it that texture, because that's just not the normal bread texture when you're using minimal ingredients. So I'm still searching for a good sandwich bread, which is why mainly I'm the only one eating sourdough. West would love a slice of toast. Sometimes in the evening when we want a snack, I'll say, do you want a slice of toast? And we'll pull out the sourdough. He loves it. He'll eat it. It's not the best for sandwiches. Now, if it was a hot sandwich, if we made a grilled cheese sandwich with a sourdough, that'd be wonderful. If it was, just toasting your sandwich, it'd be really, really good because toasting brings out the moisture and makes it softer and more malleable. But we just don't tend to eat sandwiches like that. If we're going to have a sandwich, it's usually just meat and cheese and go for it. So this goes back in the fridge, and then next time you'll see me, it'll be the day of making bread. So I should tell you what happens the day of bread making. In order to fit it all in one day, I need West's help because I don't wake up early in the morning. And timing of sourdough is long and drawn out. So it's basically, he wakes up early, he goes through this process of feeding the starter like I just showed, and then texts me, I fed the starter. And so then I have a timestamp on that text saying when it happened. And so I can know that my step and my next process in the bread making happens 4 hours after that, because then I have my happiest, fullest, most fed starter to work with. And so that's where we'll pick up. Supplies I use for sourdough starting or sourdough making is, you got your mason jar, you got our scale that can tare. For the actual process, I just use my biggest Pyrex bowl and I put my lid on loosely. I have a timer to keep track of times. And I want to get a banneton, which is an actual bread form that you can put your formed loaves in, but that's a purchase. So they're not expensive. They're like $20 for two. But I just haven't got around to having the money to do that yet. When I form it and put it in my bowl, they're flatter and wider than they would be if I used a banneton. But I put it back in the bowl that I started with when I made the dough. And the trick with that is I put it in there with a wet or a damp towel underneath it, so it's easier to get out when I'm ready to cook it. And for cooking, I use parchment paper, and I also use a Dutch oven, which helps mimic the steam oven effect that people usually like using when baking. So those are the supplies I use. Oh, and there's a knife involved somewhere for scoring the loaf. People have special fancy scalpels they'll use to make designs. I just use a knife. Sharp knife, helpful. So other than like having a Dutch oven big enough, that's really the only like specialty supply you would need. And even then, most kitchens will have that. And I like using an enameled Dutch oven just because it's easier for cleaning and resetting. I don't have to worry about seasoning it and taking care of it. So, and I'll see you when we're ready to start working on the bread. Welcome back. It's the day of baking. We fed the starter roughly at 9 o'clock, and you can see this is the brevand. That's how high it is. It's now 1:03. So it is time to get to work and turn this into bread. The first step, this is my very fancy recipe, all written down on a Post-it note. The first step is to grind my flour, and for one loaf, that is going to be 500 grams of flour. So I have my scale, it's tiered out to grams, and this is my grain. And I'm reusing a bucket, but this one is hard white wheat. So we want to measure out 500. So 500. So my bucket can go away back into the cupboard. I buy my grain from a farm in Oregon through Amazon. So I get smaller bags and I can just decant them into my buckets. So here's my grain, here's my grain mill, and now we can start grinding. This can go back in the cupboard. Okay, so here we are, put my big bowl on my scale and tear it out. And I have my water here, just testing that it's no more than 110, and it's 91-ish, so that's fine. And according to my list, water is 350 grams. Yeah, it's close. And then I like to do my starter, and it's gonna be 125. You can see it's all stretchy. It's not thin. Of course, people talk about different textures of starters, and some people like a thinner, but this is what I'm used to. So we said 125. So there's 125. And this, I'm going to scrape down the sides and stick it in the fridge. And it'll sit there as is until I'm ready to make bread again. And then I'll pull it out a couple days before the bread making and bring it up to room temperature and feed it a couple times before it's time to make bread. But so I have, 2 to 3 days leading up to stuff where I'm having sourdough discard, but most of the time I don't have to worry about it. So into the fridge this goes. And I like dissolving my starter into the water I don't know if that makes a difference, but in my mind it's consistent inoculation, if that makes sense. There's not going to be lumps and bumps where things will have more starter in it than others. If all the water has starter in it, then it's just more evenly spread out. The next thing is going to be salt, which is going to be 10 grams. And people talk about when is the best time to add salt, because salt can slow down the fermentation process, if not even stop it. But according to the tutorial from Roots and Refuge that I was watching, she just puts it in at this stage, and I've been doing that for the last several times, and it doesn't seem to make a difference. So it doesn't seem to harm anything. So 10 is our goal. So 10. And then the next step's really simple because we've already weighed out the grains, so we just dump in all the flour because we already know that's going to be 500. So I'm done weighing. And just give this a little mix because the salt was clumped on the side, but it's not a big deal. And in goes the flour. This can go back in the cupboard. So now it's just a matter of mixing it so that it's a consistent texture. There's no big clumps of flour or water. I do find that with whole milled, freshly ground whole grain flour, however you want to say it, freshly milled, it tends to be dry. And even now you can see I have a lot of dry flour and a shaggy mass in the middle. So my recipe says 350 water, but I always add a splash or two at this point because for me there's no harm in having it a little bit wetter, and there's a lot of harm in too dry because it doesn't rise right if it's too dry. So it's starting to pull flour from the sides now, and I will probably rinse my hands and get in there to do the last bit of incorporating of the flour. And a trick that I've learned through working with gluten-free bread is that if you have a wet dough, keep your hands wet. And it helps it from sticking to your hands so much. And I think I'm going to get my plastic scraper. I like these because it conforms to the shape of your bowl, so you get a better scraping, and dough rarely ever sticks to this texture. So just rolling it against the side of the bowl to get as much as possible. Getting the dough off my fingers. But that is pliable. It's not crunchy and dry. It has some movement to it. So I think that's a good amount. So you see, I did the 300 grams of water and then just splashed a little extra to get everything to incorporate. So, set my lid on top of it. Don't actually seal it. Just set it on top to keep things from falling into it and bugs to getting in. And I'm going to set my timer for an hour. And at that point, I'll come in and do a stretch and fold. So, set this aside on my seed starting mat over here in the corner. And wipe down my surface from the flour I splashed around. So at some point in learning about sourdough, somebody had said don't use metal with sourdough. And so my habit is to use silicone or plastic or something like that, and not to use my metal spoons or metal bowls. I don't know if it's really a big deal or not. It's now my habit to do that. So 1 hour. So that'll remind me to come in here and do the stretch and fold. Put rings back on. So I'll see you in a second, for me in an hour. Welcome back. It's been an hour, so let's work on our stretch and folds. So here's my dough. And it might have changed a little bit, but not a whole lot. Taking my rings back off. And in this process, it's really helpful to have wet hands. So I'm going to have the water going, just dribbling away next to me. So stretch and fold is literally you stretch it and you pull it back on itself. Let me bring you in closer to see this. So I have my bowl of water, my hands, my fingers, just dipping my fingers on it. And I'm going into the edge, pulling up, wiggling it a bit, folding it over. And I do this about 20 times. So 2, okay, so that's about 20 times. So my stretch and fold is finished. I'm done with this lovely water. I can go in the dishwasher. Once again, I'm setting my lid on top. I'm not sealing it. I'm going to put it over on the heating mat. And last time I did this, I did it for, I think it was about 10 hours, and it was overproofed. So this time I'm going to set a timer at 6, and somewhere between 6 and 8 probably stop it and say you're good enough. And this time I'm also going to actually take a picture of it now so I can visually compare how big it is. Because last time it got nice and big and bubbly, but like I said, I think it was overproofed. I think it got too big. Because it needs to have a little bit of oomph left in it, a little bit of food left in it to give it that final rise in the oven. And if you overproof it, it won't do that. It'll fall flat. So I'll see you at about 6 hours. So it's like 2:30 now. So about 8:30 or so, we'll see each other again. So see you in a moment. Okay, it's been 6.5 hours since we set this aside, and it's definitely changed and it's grown. I don't know if it's exactly 2, but it's definitely bigger, and I don't want to push it like I did last time. So we get to shape it into a loaf and then put it back so you shape it into a loaf, and the whole point of that is to make tension on top, and then you put the nice tight smooth side down, face down into your bowl, so that when you flip it over onto your pan the next day, the happy side's facing up. But sourdough dough is very wet and very sticky and very loose. So in order to help it come in and out, we have to have something to help us. So we're going to have a dishcloth that's been wetted and wrung out. We are with our dishcloth, and I need to wash my hands first. So I just got back from errands. So my shaping technique of a loaf is based, I learned it for a loaf of bread, not necessarily a round of bread. So I don't know if my technique's really the best one to follow, but it's what I do and I can show it to you and you can decide. I haven't got around to learning a different method. This has worked for me so far, so just going according to this. So wet the washcloth, wrung it out, and have it available. And then in here, we want to wipe down the counter from dinner. So it's about 9 o'clock right now. Just got back from errands and on our way to heading towards bed. So the countertop is wiped off and the dough comes out. And in my bowl goes my damp washcloth. Not washcloth, dishcloth. So, for the dough, the first thing I'm going to do is have the water running a little bit, because once again, it's very sticky. And I think this is called the lamination process. Basically, just trying to pull it out as big and as thin as possible. One big sheet of dough. Very sticky dough. And I'd like it to be a rough rectangle because the next step I'm going to be folding it into thirds. I don't necessarily want big air pockets in it either, so if I see any, I'm going to try to eliminate them. Okay, so that's probably as big as it's going to get. And now there comes the process of folding it over into thirds. Once again, no air pockets. So now I have my big long dough, and now we're gonna start rolling. And when I roll, I'm pulling and turning to create tension. So in the process, I am creating layers and layers of dough and fiber, lamination. And if it's thick, Then I can sit in one place and keep pulling and turning, and it helps thin out the layer too. Okay, so there's my rolled up. Kind of reminds me of a croissant roll. And now we have all these layers on the side. I'm going to start tucking them under so we don't have exposed open layers. So I'm just tucking, turning and tucking, and that should create some surface tension on top. So the top is tight, but the bottom has some seams. So the top goes down first, like that. So this, I now put the lid on and I actually do try to get it to close. Looks a little bit silly with all this towel hanging off, but that's just how it's gonna be. And then this gets put in the fridge overnight. And anywhere between now and tomorrow at 9, I can bake it. So sometime tomorrow morning when I'm doing stuff around home, then I'll end up working on baking the bread. So I will see you then. Good morning. It's the next morning. It is about 10:20 and I'm ready to start working on the bread. So the first step is to pull out my Dutch oven and preheat my oven to 450. And I want to preheat the Dutch oven in my oven so that when I put my bread in it, it's nice and hot and it causes that steam reaction we're looking for. So 450, and then my pot goes in. And I'll go ahead and pull the dough out of the refrigerator. And take the lid off. And it's relaxed some, but it hasn't necessarily risen any. As you can see, it's bigger than when I put it in. So sitting on the counter as the oven's warming up, it should come up to temperature, and it might even rise a little bit then. So I'm going to put this over on the heating mat. I want the lid to be loose so it can breathe. And I'll get my parchment paper ready. I don't remember, I think it had to do with the sourdough, but a trick I've learned with parchment paper when you're putting it in like a big pot or something to help it conform to the sides is you pull off your sheet and then you crumple it up. So now it's more flexible and will conform to different shapes. And then I wet it and wring it out. But I'm not going to wet it until I'm ready to put the bread in. So I'm just going to leave it here, ready and waiting for me. It's really just a matter of waiting for my oven to preheat. Depending on your oven, it could be 30, 40 minutes or whatever. So I'm going to go about my morning until I hear my oven give me a little ding saying it's preheated. And then I will move on to the next step. Okay. My oven has preheated, so I'm going to wet my parchment paper. And I need my gloves. The parchment paper can go out on the counter. Lid can go in the sink. And parchment paper over top. Grab the whole thing. Invert. Bowl. Thank you for your service. It can be cleaned. Towel. Go into the laundry. And I never really seem to get it so it's in the center of the parchment paper, but at this point you can't really move it, so you just live with it. Sharp knife, and for the maximum rise I've found for myself, I just do an X or a plus sign or whatever you want to call it, just 2 large gashes, and you do want to cut pretty deeply, and this is just encouraging the rise of the bread. You're cutting through all of the layers of lamination and just allowing it to expand as tall as possible. So knife is done. With your gloves, you're going to carefully come over to the oven, pull out your tray, take off your very hot lid, and then we're going to lower our bread into our very hot pan. Put the hot lid back on, cover it, trap in the steam, close it all up. So that is on 450, and with the lid on, we're going to cook it for 30 minutes. So 30 minutes.
30 minutes, counting down.
At the end of that 30 minutes, I'll come over and take the lid off and let it go for another 15. And then at the end of the 15 minutes, I'll be checking it with my thermometer until it gets to 205 degrees. When I was researching bread and all this sort of thing and learning about the idea of temping your bread, I remember everybody was saying, oh, 190 is the number to go for. And then I was watching the tutorial from Roots of Refuge, and she said, oh, no, it's 205. And so that got me looking up, and my understanding at this point is 190 is for enriched breads, so you have your milk and your eggs and other things in it, and 205 is for your unenriched breads. So sourdough is definitely unenriched. So that is the goal, is 205, and once we get to 205, I'll bring it out and let it cool down on the counter. So I'll see you at the next step. Okay, the timer's gone off for the 15 minutes on the bread, so it's now time to temperature check it. Once again, I'm looking for 205 degrees. So I'm going to set my little alarm. It's already set for 205. Okay, the edge of the bread's done, the middle it's not quite, but I think it'll cook through because it's only at 203 and climbing, so I think it'll be fine to take it out. I'm very carefully gonna grab my paper and lift it out. Let me bring you over so you can get a close-up. So there's my bread already. I'm so excited to try it tomorrow. I missed it this morning. This morning I had to do pancakes instead of my sourdough, which, oh, poor me, pancakes, but I really did miss it. So there you have it. That is my sourdough process, and it's now 11:30 in the morning, and In reality, I could have baked that bread like right before dinner if I wanted to include it with dinner, or at any point today, because it can be in my fridge for up to 24 hours. So the benefit of having it in the fridge overnight is that it just is a longer fermentation process, and putting it in the fridge slows it down, so the likelihood of overproofing it is much less. So that is my process of sourdough. I hope that you found it enjoyable, informative, helpful, and if nothing else, I got to keep you company today on this a little bit longer video, but this is a process. I've been doing sourdough on and off for years now. It's just a matter of, do I have the bandwidth to babysit and take care of a starter, and do I have the time to consider how it's gonna, it's not a quick bread. It's not I want bread in an hour, it's not that kind of bread. But I firmly believe it's more beneficial for my body. It's easier to digest. It makes nutrition more available in the grain. And I just like the taste of sourdough. I grew up in California, and we had the San Francisco Sourdough Company. And that was a very sourdough, but I don't know how actually traditional it was, because it was definitely a manufactured bread. So there it is. Until next time, feel free to like and subscribe. And until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. Good morning. It's the next morning, and we're going to enjoy some toast with our breakfast, as we showed you me cutting it.
Good morning. It is really good. A little bit of butter on it helps, or doesn't hurt, enhances the flavor.
Yum. I love it. It's tasty.
Let us know your experience when you try the bread.
Have a wonderful day.